Hello and welcome to the National Leadership Briefing. My name is Doug Sharpe and I will be your host for today. Good to have you with us. For those of you who are new to the call, you are in the right place, because if you believe that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want, if you believe that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion, if you believe that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens and provide that specifically for vulnerable persons that live in our community, and if you also believe that it is inappropriate for civil government to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations, those are the pillars that we are here rallying around today, and we are stronger today because of you. Because the moment that you added your voice to ours, we had more influence advancing those ideas into the realms of society, culture, politics, and government. And that is why we meet once a month for no more than 1 hour, and we just touch base and we acknowledge that we are in relationship and looking for those opportunities on the horizon where we can have influence and advance these ideas. So thank you again for coming. Good to have you with us. Good to have your voice added to ours. Now let's take a look at what it is that we're going to be reviewing today. We have a jam-packed schedule, so I'm going to move quite quickly, but remember, if you are signed up and have received a link for this call today, you will receive post-briefing notes delivered to your email. Now, if you're watching the National Leadership Briefing on either our YouTube channel or on one of the other social media platforms, you will not receive the post-briefing notes unless you go to nlbcanada.ca, that's nlbcanada.ca, and click register and register for the National Leadership Briefing. Now, because we go so quickly, we provide these post-briefing notes to everybody so that you have information to reference to the things that are relevant to you in the communities where you live and the things that will help serve you where you're called to serve in those communities. So please make sure you register at nlbcanada.ca and make sure you get those post notes. Well, let's take a look at what our schedule is here today. Today, I'm going to be making introductions for you of a few people, and I want to make sure that you know who's going to be coming on today. We have a school board trustee coming on today. We mentioned last time that it's time for us to activate people at the local level in communities and as school board trustees. And so I'm going to be introducing you to a school board trustee that's going to help us with that. I'm also going to introduce you to a member of the Canadian Senate today. We've got someone joining us today that is going to have a conversation with us about legislation, the euthanasia bill, Bill C7, that has recently gone from the Senate back into the House of Commons. And we also have a member of Parliament joining us today to talk about the issue of pornography. There is an opportunity on the horizon where we in Canada, all rallying around the four pillars, we can advance our ideas and have a huge impact on a conversation that's taking place regarding access to pornography here in our country. So I'm going to introduce you to this member of Parliament. We're also going to be updating you on the governance side of the conversation with respect to the upcoming Conservative Party of Canada policy convention. As you may know, if you've been with us before, we have been spending a considerable amount of time preparing delegates to go and vote at convention for policies. But there is another side to what is happening at convention, and that is where issues of governance are going to come up, where we are going to have an opportunity as voting delegates to establish the rules of the political party and to amend them where necessary to ensure that level playing field so that gatekeepers don't restrict our access to political processes here in Canada. We're also going to have a conversation today about the governance of the party itself, the Conservative Party of Canada, and what delegates are going to have the opportunity to do in electing the board of directors for that party. So that's an important conversation to have and for you to be aware about, because when you understand the political structures in our nation, it helps you to understand where barriers might be placed in front of us that limit our access to them. And we've been talking a little bit about gatekeeper lately. We don't want people gatekeeping. We don't want people keeping us out of processes and things that we're entitled to participate in as citizens of Canada. So that is another conversation we're having. And then finally, we're going to take a second look in closing at the CAG ministry resources that we have released so far. And that is the Citizen Action Group ministry resources that we made available. We're going to take a second look at them because there's been a few people that have brought up to me that they're having questions about how they're supposed to be using them. So I want to make sure that when we put a tool in your hands as a pastor or a church leader, and especially when it's something like a ministry tool that you can use inside your churches, there's a clear understanding as to what we recommend is the best way to use them. So we're going to close with that today, and that should bring us right to the end of the hour. So thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for your time. Just enjoy this quick video, and then we are going to jump right in, and I'm going to introduce you to a school board trustee that is going to help us find those in our communities that want to serve in this way. These are the things that we believe in. First, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number three, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number four, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They came from you. They're your pillars. They're the things that you believe. Okay, well, thank you so much, Leanne, for joining us today. I've been excited about having the opportunity to share the knowledge of who you are with other people here on the National Leadership Briefing for quite a while now. And here we are. We made it. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Doug. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you.
Good, good. Well, we're going to talk a little bit today about our favorite subject, and that's getting things done. And one of the things that you have in your history is you have a very solid list of accomplishments of getting things done as a school board trustee. But before we jump into all about that, I want to kind of bring everybody back to the very beginning, because, you know, I mean, I wanted to bring you on here today and introduce you with it to everybody, because there was a time when you were like just a mom which is great, and a member of the faith community and a person who was raising their family, and something happened. All of a sudden you got something on your heart. So can you just tell us a little about where you came from, and tell me about that moment you sort of turned and started looking at this possibility of being a school board trustee? Can you do that?
Well, my experience was a call. I wasn't raised in a political home. We knew who the prime minister was and who the president was and a few little things, but I didn't have an agenda. I'm not running for MLA or anything like that. This isn't a stepping stone. It was clearly a call, and that's a whole other story we can talk about another time if you like. But raising my kids in a community where we were almost forced to be involved in order to get things done. Funding issues and, you know, all kinds of different topics that would come up, and they concerned the family, and the concerns within the church family. You know, our faith community was always looking at how is it affecting our kids, and how can we get involved to make sure that our kids are getting the best education that they can.
So you just became aware of this, some of the concerns, because you saw how they were going to impact your family. Mm-hmm. And how did the decision happen? I mean, I always wonder myself as to when there's got to be this moment in time where you have to say to yourself, I'm going to take action. Can you tell me a little bit about what was happening around that time in your life?
Well, to be very honest, I didn't have that moment. I didn't come charging in with a sword. I was actually a trustee already before the topics really bubbled up. So it was more of a calling, and I just answered the call, and I was in place. And then in my second term, during the election campaign, the real topics started coming up. And those were SOGI 123 was the hot topic, which you and I met. I had an emergency call to Doug. What do I do now? Because I was already committed to running, and I could tell that was the reason I was called, but I had several things to learn along the way. So I learned what I needed to know because I didn't have that political background. I learned that in my first term. And then when I was running for my second term was when things really heated up. And I knew the moment that topic hit the table, I knew that's why I was there.
You've now been a school board trustee for how many years?
I'm in the middle of my second term, so this is my 6th year.
6th year. Okay, so 6 years of experience. Everybody on the National Leadership Briefing today, we have somebody in front of us who has been doing something for 6 years. Now, I've been doing what Leanne's been doing for 0 years, which makes her the expert. And what's really neat about having you here today, Leanne, is because you and I talked on the phone just the last couple of weeks here, and you told me something about where you believe you're supposed to be going next. Tell everybody about what you told me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I've had 2 separate occasions where I've woken up in the middle of the night feeling that I'm here to help others do what I'm doing. My husband and I have this debate going back and forth on whether or not I'm running again. He's convinced I am. I haven't had that answer yet, but we'll see when we get there. But I would love to empower other people to do what I've done, because if I can do it, anybody can. And I know people say that all the time, but I had no experience. I didn't even know what I was getting into. I jumped in blindly, and I thank goodness I know how to tread water, because I did a lot of that at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you did jump in, because now you have a vault of experience that you are now willing to share with other people. And on the last National Leadership Briefing, I kind of alluded to everybody that there was this thing that we were going to start doing here on the National Leadership Briefing, and that's calling forth people from the communities of Canada, people of faith, people who share our views and values, who support the principles of the 4 pillars, calling them forth, those that believe that they're called to serve as school board trustees, because we were going to provide them with the resources and introduce them to the people that can help them make that happen in their own community. And here you are today. And thank you so much for your willingness to serve there. Now, so we're going to start this now today. I've just introduced everybody to you, Leanne. Leanne, do you have some things that just as initial stepping stones, what can people be doing right now to test their hearts, to test their call, to understand, to ask the Lord where they should be? What do you recommend they do right now, just to open up the conversation in themselves about whether or not they are called to serve as school board trustees in their neighborhoods and areas?
So the biggest thing is pray about it and listen. I remember the moment that I finally decided to listen to what I thought I was hearing. And when I listened to that, I knew it, and there was no question, and I just went ahead. The first thing I would do is the things that I didn't do. So I would, if I could go back and do it over again, I would check the next election, the schedule. When is the next election coming up?
All right.
Because mine actually, I think it took me a round of a term for me to catch up to what I was being called to do. So my call clearly came in 2011 during that municipal election, and then I ran in 2014. So it took me that whole round to catch up. But understanding when the next election is.
Okay, so first get on that, get on the internet locally, find out when the next school board trustee election is in your area.
And then the other thing would be the board structure and the schedule of the time commitment. So I have a sister-in-law who's a school trustee in Saskatchewan, and it's very different than being a trustee in BC, but also rural as opposed to urban is also other different schedules. So in a rural area, they often will travel together and have a day-long meeting where they cover all of their committee topics. Where I live, we're very central, and we have committee meetings one week, and then we have, quick Zoom calls, and then we have board meetings, we have in-camera meetings. They're mostly evening. I work full-time, and I'm a trustee by night, I guess you could say.
Okay.
But understanding that schedule first, and if it would fit with your time commitment is a big thing. Okay.
And what else should they know then? They've got obviously they're going to be now checking online again, where if you just go online and find out what the schedule is and when the meetings are. What else do you recommend people do right away to test their hearts and whether this is their call?
I would say attend meetings. And right now is prime prime opportunity to be doing that. Poking your head into a Zoom meeting is a lot easier than poking your head into a public meeting like I had to do. Yeah, I don't know any boards that are meeting personally right now in their boardrooms, but some might be. But if you can pop onto a Zoom call and just, be a fly on the wall, understanding who the players are at the table is huge.
Well, I can tell that you are going to be a great resource for people on the road ahead. Now our plan here, Leanne and I talked about this before she came on, and what we're going to do is, this is the plan, is Leanne has agreed to put together a one-pager with just a couple of these points that she's mentioned here today. A great way to get started, getting started right in exploring this. But we've made a commitment together to have Leanne back, and we're going to start developing more comprehensive resources for those of you who actually take this up. And so we're going to be walking that road with you. If you want to prepare yourself to be a candidate and run in your own community as a school board trustee, you've got someone with 6 years experience right here who wants to help you make that happen. So thanks, Leanne. Anything else before we wrap up today?
I don't know. Did you want to touch on the 4 pillars?
Well, actually, I'm gonna touch on the 4 pillars in a minute, but I gotta set that up in the next segment.
Okay. Great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Always
Leanne.
a pleasure.
Yeah,
Always a
we'll
pleasure
be back.
talking to
We'll have
you.
you back soon, really soon.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Doug.
God bless. Bye-bye.
The bear has been poked. It's time to wake up from our slumber
and stand together, united as one. One family, one body, one church.
We will not walk past the vulnerable.
Say nothing, do nothing, and turn a blind eye.
We are citizens of a great nation.
We are good Samaritans to our neighbors. You are not alone.
We are the largest unified voice in Canada. So we stand united. This is our rally cry. We are Christ to our nation. This is our battle cry. He shall have dominion from sea to sea and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Righteousness will reign. Justice will prevail. We are united.
Okay, let's move on. Now, here on the National Leadership Briefing, we like to stay on mission, on task, and we like to execute when we have the opportunity. And we have an opportunity now to bring the very principles that we want to advance into society, culture, politics, and government. We have an opportunity to bring one of those principles represented in the 3rd pillar before a lawmaker here in Canada, in fact, a member of the Canadian Senate. That is the opportunity we have before us. And so I'd like to introduce you to that individual now. Well, thank you so much, Senator Don Plett, for joining us today on the National Leadership Briefing. It is good to see you again. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful, Doug. Nice to see you again. Man, we had some good times on National Council, you and I, Doug.
We did. Go back a long ways. You were a longtime mentor and coach. I thank you for that, by the way. So here we are today. I'm with the National Leadership Briefing, and we're advancing 4 pillars into society, culture, politics, and government. And one of them is, of course, we believe that laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of citizens, especially the vulnerable. And so you and I have been talking about Bill C-7, the euthanasia bill, and it looks like as in all legislation, the Senate of Canada plays a key role in this piece of legislation being advanced and possibly becoming law. Can we start there today, Senator Plett? And if I could ask you, what is the role, if you wouldn't mind just sort of summarizing as a member of the Senate in Canada, what is the role the Senate is playing in this and all legislation? And what role do you play as a member of the Senate specifically?
Well, thank you, Doug. So the Senate was established to provide sober second thought, and we are a body that is not caught up in an election cycle, which allows us as parliamentarians to think long-term as we review legislation in depth. And the Senate does tremendous work while studying legislation at committees. As senators, our role is to represent and fight for regions that we represent as we study government proposed legislation. I need to, as a senator from Manitoba, evaluate proposed legislation that affects my province as well as the entire country. The Senate has a duty to provide a voice for various minorities in our country. And on this point, it's important to not only listen to the voices of concerns over government legislation, we also have an obligation and a duty to propose thoughtful amendments to government bills when they are flawed in hopes to make bills better. Last but not least, the Senate should act as a check on the extraordinary power of the Prime Minister's office.
Excellent. Thank you for that, because that's really important and helpful for people to know a little bit more about the Senate itself. Now, your role in the Senate, you are a leader in the Senate. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thank you. Yes, in addition to what I have described as the role of a senator for Manitoba, I am also the leader of the opposition party in the Senate, the Conservative Party of Canada. I was elected by my colleagues to be in that position as the leader of the Senate Conservative Caucus. Now, although we do not have a majority in the Senate, we are a very, very effective team, one that I am proud to be a part of and indeed lead. And the only group or caucus that has received a clear mandate from Canadians. The Conservative Caucus has the privilege of speaking for the more than 6 million Canadians, Doug, who voted for the ideas, policies, and visions brought forward by our party in the last election. Regardless of who is in power, the role of the opposition is essential to the proper working of Parliament. It is fundamental to a healthy democracy. Ideas, policies, legislation should be challenged with a view to ensuring the best possible outcome for the Federation as a whole and regions individually. While the current Trudeau government envisions a Senate without an opposition, the Constitution and our founding fathers would beg to differ. Conservatives take the role of opposition seriously, and I'm proud to be a member of that team.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the great work you are doing. We've been witnessing it since you've been there, and extremely impressed with the body of work that you've done. Now, moving on to kind of dialing a little bit on Bill C7, something kind of interesting and unusual. Well, I guess it's not so unusual. It does happen from time to time where a bill leaves the House of Commons and goes into the Senate and then is amended by the Senate and sent back to the House of Commons. That has just happened in the case of Bill C7. And I wanted to hear from you today about not only your views on Bill C7 and what transpired and how it was received, but some of the amendments that were made and some of the concerns you might have about it, about it going now back to the House of Commons with amendments.
Well, yes, Doug. You know, I took part in most of the Senate committee hearings, the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee. We did a pre-study. We had 82 witnesses at pre-study. During the pre-study, we heard overwhelming concerns that the proposed legislation as it was, witness after witness raised concerns about flaws within the legislation, taking away safeguards that were there. And if anything was evident from our extensive committee study, it was that no sufficient evidence or data available to justify the removal of one single safeguard. Following this, the Senate studied the bill again at committee, and we had 133 witnesses. Several amendments were brought forward in the Senate, not at committee, but at the Senate. And I personally moved 2 amendments, one to provide physician-assisted dying to be patient-led. And I've got to tell you, on this issue, we heard heartbreaking testimony from people with disabilities that are offered assisted suicide repetitively without prompting this topic, without the patient asking for this. And even more troublesome was that they aren't offered proper treatment, palliative care. 30% of Canadians have palliative care. The message that they are being given is that their lives are not worth living. The life experience of some of the witnesses were and are deplorable. And I've got to tell you, Doug, I was deeply troubled by one witness, Gabrielle Peters, 2 witnesses, I should say, Gabrielle and Jonathan Marchand, expressed as their experiences that we must do a better job to support people with disabilities to fight for life. And we are not doing that. We are telling disabled people that you're a burden on society, and maybe dying is better than living. My second amendment was to ensure the protection of freedom and conscience rights for physicians and or institutions who do not wish to participate directly or indirectly in assisted suicide. And again, we heard from witnesses that the bill needed greater clarity. As a matter of fact, the Ontario Medical Association wrote to our committee asking for this amendment. The amendment was also in line with the request we received from Indigenous leaders who called on the Government of Canada to recognize the value of Aboriginal healing practices by respecting Indigenous people's right to self-determination in spiritual matters, including the right to practice their own traditions and customs when supporting those who are dying without discrimination in the healthcare system. Sadly, the Senate as a whole failed to approve either of these amendments and safeguards. There was, quite frankly, little interest in ensuring that safeguards were kept in place, and even less interest in adding further safety nets.
In fact, they took a couple of the safeguards away specifically before sending it back to the House, and now the House is considering the legislation with these amendments.
Well, you're absolutely right, Doug. Denise Batters tried to put back in a reflection period. There used to be a reflection period. The reflection period has been taken out. Senator Batters wanted to put back in a 10-day reflection period from when you made a decision to avail yourself of assisted suicide till when the procedure actually took place. That safeguard has been removed. You know, Doug, in the province of Nova Scotia, if you want to get married and you get a marriage certificate and a marriage license, you have to reflect for 5 days before you can get married, because indeed marriage is a serious commitment. And yet, for asking for assisted suicide, you can go in the morning, ask for it, and the procedure can happen by day's end. A big safeguard. Another safeguard, of course, the mental illness one. It just is so difficult to accept that a sole underlying reason for asking for assisted suicide would be mental illness. In what we are living in over the last year and a bit now with the pandemic, businesses that are going under, people that are losing their jobs, parents that are struggling because there is no schools, depression becoming such a big factor, and where depression can be a reason to ask for assisted suicide is just, and for the government to indicate to us that they are going to accept this amendment. And as I said earlier, in my opinion, clearly orchestrated by the government. The government leader in the Senate did not speak to the amendment on mental illness. He did not speak. The sponsor of the bill in the Senate spoke for about 2 minutes, not even opposing this amendment. And for the government to support an amendment like this, and then, of course, the Minister of Justice immediately coming out and agreeing to this amendment when he should have challenged the lower court's decision to even open up the entire assisted suicide regime is mind-boggling.
That is, and very concerning to the people that we serve here on the National Leadership Briefing, because we saw all the way along. We were hearing from disability groups. We were hearing from individuals who have citizens who are vulnerable living in their communities, and they were reaching out and saying, we want to make sure that they're protected. That's what we want to make sure happens. And that doesn't appear to be the case, obviously, with this piece of legislation. Now we've got it in the House of Commons. It's going to end up coming back to the Senate, and everyone we're serving is saying, what can we do? Senator Plett, can you give us some advice or counsel as to what you think would be a positive step that citizens of Canada can take to help senators and parliamentarians make as good a decision as they can in this circumstance?
Well, thank you, Doug. Listen, the Conservatives in the House of Commons are not going to let this bill pass without proper debate. It is sad when the debate hasn't yet started and the Liberal government is accusing Conservatives of filibustering. They have not started the debate. The government plans the agenda. I think they've had 3 hours of debate so far. The government sets the legislative agenda, not the opposition. And yet there we have the Liberals and the Bloc accusing the Conservatives of filibustering. But I assure you, Doug, the Conservative Party of Canada will give this thorough vetting. They are not going to speak endlessly and needlessly, but they will not allow this to go. So what the average Canadian can do right now is they can talk to their MP. They can write their MP. They can insist from their MP that this removing the safeguards that have been removed in this bill go contrary to what the general public wants. They go contrary to what the Indigenous leaders have been begging for. They go contrary to what the disabled community has been begging for. The disabled community is being singled out here as a group of people whose lives are not worth living. And this has to be brought to the attention of every single member of Parliament. Canadians need to reach out. They need to send them letters. They need to flood their emails. They need to make every effort to convince their MPs to vote the right way on this legislation.
Well, I thank you for that, and to have you, and if I could just speak directly to the people that we're serving here today, is that we have Senator Don Plett, the senators in the Conservative senators in the Senate of Canada. We have parliamentarians in the House that are willing to stand in defense of vulnerable citizens here in Canada, and we need to first say thank you and encourage the other senators who are perhaps not going to make as wise a choice here to make a good stand and vote against this legislation. So please, let's take the advice of somebody who's willing to stand and get in touch with our members of Parliament, get in touch with our senators as well, and let them know that we consider the disabled and people who are vulnerable to be a priority for us here in Canada. Thank you, Senator Plett. Wow, is there anything else that we should add before we?
Well, listen. Again, Doug, I don't think it can be overemphasized that every member of Parliament is concerned about this legislation, okay. And they want to do what is right. And listen, we can have differences of opinions, and in fact, we do. But every member of Parliament feels very serious about this. And I think the general public can have a huge impact in speaking out at this very, very important time.
Well, that's what our people love to do, is speak out, because they want to stand in defense. So thank you so much, Senator Plett, for your time today. And thank you for, if there's anything that we can do to help on the road ahead, let us know. And perhaps you and I could just stay in touch from here on in on this.
Doug, I'd love nothing more than that. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Appreciate your time.
If I had to go ahead and do what the doctors wanted me to do, I wouldn't have had her.
What was that?
Well, they wanted me to do assisted suicide death on her.
This is your story. You said a couple of things on the CBC News story. I remember they said, "Did you want to die?" And what did you say?
I don't know. I don't want to. She got sick here at home. We got the ambulance. When we got her to the hospital, she was having seizures. They had to give her medication, take her heart rate down. Her heart rate was very high, something 170. This doctor that was seeing her first, and he came in and he told me that her kidney wasn't in the right spot. He told me the lower parts of her lungs had collapsed, so they admitted her. And the next day, when he came in, he took me out in the hallway and he just stood me up against the wall and he told me about assisted suicide death was legal in Canada. And I said, well, he asked, did I know? And I said, no. And then he said, he was all for it, and I said, well, that was your choice. And I told him I wasn't interested in anything to do with assisted suicide death. And he told me, he said, I was being selfish, and he wanted to assist me in doing this, and I said, I'm not interested. I more or less walked away from her. She heard everything, and...
You heard what the doctor said?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Not feeling good.
like not once did she ever say to them, I want to end my life. Not once.
You said they talked about it a lot. Did they talk about it a lot with you?
Yeah.
And this doctor came in, and next day after he told me about the assisted suicide death, and stuck his face down in hers and said, do you know how sick you are? And I'm just like, and when I got his eyes contact, I went my eyes like that to get out in the hallway, and I told him, don't you ever pull something like that again.
So at that time, were you worried that Candace was going to die?
They had told me that she was dying. I believed them. They were the doctors, and she was so sick. So, but I told her if she wanted to go, it was good. She could go. But she didn't. She don't cry, honey. But she didn't want me to be alone. Don't cry. It's all done now. It's over. We just don't want it to happen to anybody else, hey?
No.
Don't want another family to go through this.
Well, I couldn't think of a more appropriate person for us to remind ourselves of than Candace Lewis following our conversation with Senator Plett. Candace, obviously experiencing that during her short life, was very hard and tragic to think about. Well, now removing more safeguards when it comes to euthanasia legislation here in Canada, things start becoming more and more unthinkable, but they are a reality, and we need to respond and react. So I urge you, please get in touch with your member of parliament, as Senator Plett has suggested, and let them know of your concerns for the vulnerable people that live among you in your communities. Okay, now moving on, we have another opportunity before us to continue to stay on mission, on task, and execute and bring our concerns and our interests forward to our lawmakers here in Canada. We have a member of parliament. The gentleman's name is Arnold Vierson. You are going to enjoy meeting him. He is the member of parliament from Peace River Westlock. So here, let me introduce you to him now. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so exciting to have you here because I've been watching your work in the House of Commons for many years now, and I'm really impressed when you stand up and speak in the House. People listen. I'm very happy to see you here today. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us also about this really important issue of pornography here in Canada. And why don't I just turn it right over to you first and frame the conversation about pornography and its dissemination here in Canada and internationally. Just frame the conversation for us, and then let's engage on that issue from there on.
Well, thanks, Doug. It's an honor and privilege to be here today. People always ask me like why I got involved, and I always tell them about the story of Ratea Parsons. She was a 13-year-old girl who was at a party back in 2011, I think it was, and she was raped by a number of boys at that party. And what was most disturbing about that was the fact that they videotaped the entire thing and put it up on their Facebook page. And that I always struggled with that, as to these boys weren't even embarrassed about this. This was something that they bragged about. This is something they were proud of. And so when I got elected, that was one of the questions that I was trying to answer, was like, why did these boys think that this was normal? And that brought me into the study of pornography, that found out about a company called Pornhub, and the fact that our modern day pornography is nothing like the 1950s pornography of Playboy magazine, but it's actually like a rape on screen, essentially. And so that brought forward M47, which was a motion that I moved in the House of Commons back in 2016, and it passed in 2017 unanimously through the House of Commons. One thing I always try to get people to think about is, I've always talked about pornography as being a health-related issue, and I always say pornography is to human trafficking what cigarettes are to cancer. And so when we go to tackle the issue of pornography, we should think about it in kind of those terms. So think about all the things that the government has done to prevent people using cigarettes. Back in 1968, there was almost 70% of Canadian population was smoking. Today, we're down to about 13% of the Canadian population smokes, and those that do smoke know that they're killing themselves. We need to do kind of the same thing with pornography. We need to work on ensuring that today, I think something like the numbers that I get, something like 85% of Canadians are using pornography on a weekly basis. We got to reduce that number, and we also got to inform Canadians as to the harm that they are contributing to Canadian society by participating in pornography. So many people think, oh, that there's no harm, there's a victimless crime, but in virtually every case, you are contributing to human trafficking, you're contributing to the exploitation of somebody somewhere else in the world, and that's kind of the framing that I always bring to the discussion around pornography.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. It was your caucus colleague, Rachel Harder, that made this statement. She said that the videos that you can find online are graphic, exploitive, dehumanizing, sadistic, aggressive, and altogether violent. They are humiliating. They routinely show men ignoring consent and performing sexual acts on women against their will. This is the modern day pornography. And this is something that as you so appropriately pointed out, that is being consumed here in Canada. I also understand that in Canada, and this has come lately up in the news here, that Canada is a producer of pornography and an exporter of it worldwide. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the production of pornography happens all around the world, but the one thing that Canada's claim is notorious for is a company called Pornhub, which is based in Montreal, and its parent company MindGeek. They claim that they are the largest porn website in the world. Something that I don't think Canada should be proud of, and it appears that many Canadians aren't proud of that. But nonetheless, it is a Canadian company. It's right here in our backyard in Montreal, and they claim that they are the largest in the world.
And they did the MindGeek CEO, the company MindGeek CEO, appeared before a parliamentary committee recently. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience? Because you were on that committee.
Yeah, so back in March of 2020, so MindGeek Pornhub, that company has been on my radar now since about 2017. Back in March, there was a number of members of parliament. We wrote a letter to the justice minister, just flagging a bunch of the videos that are hosted on Pornhub, and just saying, like, this seems like illegal content. Could you do something about it? That in turn spurred on a number of folks from around the world, particularly a gal named Layla Mekowick, who she started a petition, and very quickly that petition had over 1 million signatures on it, and calling for the government of Canada to do something. We then wrote another letter with about 20 members of parliament in November of 2020. And that letter got picked up by the New York Times, and the New York Times wrote an article about titled "The Children of Pornhub," and that made it international news. The Prime Minister was getting questioned about it at his morning press conferences, and so then there was a number of committees, the Status of Women Committee and the Ethics Committee, both passed motions at those committees to do a study on this, and to call the CEO and COO of the company, of MindGeek and Pornhub, to come and testify at the ethics committee. And so they did appear there, and I had an opportunity to ask them questions.
And where are we at now as our government? Where's our government now in acknowledging that this is something that needs to not only be looked at but acted on? And what is the plan moving forward to help Canadians, I guess, keep Canadians safe? Because as you know, on the National Leadership Briefing here, we look through this third pillar lens when we see issues like this, and we talk about the requirement and expectation of civil government, or that civil government will pass laws and enact policies that provide for the safety and security of citizens. And if this is prevalent and unchecked and unmonitored, and if there's, I mean, I know conservative-minded people, we don't like to be thinking about the regulation in this area, but this is a child protection issue and a societal issue. What is it that the government has been doing or needs to do more of, and any tips that you can give us or information you can give us about that?
Well, in regards to Pornhub, the company of Pornhub, it seems as if they've been participating in illegal activity. It is illegal to host or distribute child pornography, and that seems like they have been doing that. And so it's just a matter of enforcing the law with Pornhub specifically. More generally, just around preventing children from gaining access to pornography. That's a big struggle, particularly on the internet. But in the past, when you had to go buy it at a store, there was a clerk that was checking in on that. But today on the internet, there doesn't seem to be any meaningful age verification whatsoever. My colleague in the Senate, Senator Julie Milne-Deschênes, she actually has a bill called Bill S-203 that would require companies to do meaningful age verification. I'm not that prescriptive about how that is, how you want to do that, but the companies should be able to maintain keeping children off their sites. And if children are ending up on your site, then we've got a problem. And so that's the essence of her bill. If you go to my MP website, you can see I have a petition there calling for support for that. But yeah, that's fundamentally where we're at there. The other thing is just around internet companies and opt-in. So we see in the UK, we see them bring in opt-in legislation. I think the state of Utah just passed something similar, basically saying like when you get a device, there's all these settings on the device already to allow for pornography or not allow for pornography, but those settings usually come unselected and you have to go through and select them. Right. And they're just saying, just reverse it and have it so that it's selected so that you don't get the porn on your phone until you go and unselected. And it's interesting, the UK has brought this in and 70% of people never go in and change that. So.
Oh, fantastic. Now
Yeah.
and are you suggesting that might be something that is going to be advanced as a piece of legislation, is it? Or that?
Yeah, so in the UK that it hasn't been legislated. It's just the government phoned up the tech companies and said, hey, can you do this? And they've done it. The UK government said threatened legislation around it, but it's cumbersome to legislate on.
Okay.
But I know that the state of Utah has legislated on that. And so, yeah, if you buy a device in Utah, it will come with the selections already made to prevent porn from coming on your phone.
Okay, well, I can tell you that if you do make any sort of an initiative or put something together encouraging companies to opt in, then you will have an army of people that we serve that will support you in that and support it as like a citizens initiative. So perhaps that's something you and I can talk about after offline.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, thanks so much. I'm going to be sharing some additional information. I wanted this to be an introduction to the people that we serve of this issue. I'm going to be sharing some information about the issue and the conversations that you had with the CEO of MindGeek and Pornhub after, some useful links and some research as well on the issue of pornography, and not only the damage that it does, the societal harms, but the damage that it does to children, and the fact that there are victims that pornography is what people are viewing is people who have been victimized in most cases. So I'm very happy to get this conversation started here with you. Will you come back and give us an update as we've got more that we can explore and act upon?
Oh, for sure. Anytime, Doug.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Member of Parliament Arnold Vierson, for joining us today. Appreciate your time. Now we're heading down the home stretch here, and we've got two very important things to review here before we go. Wanted to first update you on the Conservative Party of Canada convention that is happening here. And so we're going to be doing that in a moment. And we're going to be focusing on the governance. Remember, we've talked about policy. We're working on that. We've got that in play. But there's also a very important governance of political parties component to that. So we'll get right back on that one. And then we'll also be winding up here and closing it down with making sure we're most effectively using the Citizen Action Group ministry tools that have been previously shared with you on the National Leadership Briefing. So after this quick video, we'll come right back and wrap up. All right, the first of the last two things that we're going to be talking about here on the National Leadership Briefing. First of all, we're going to update you on the Conservative Party of Canada Policy Convention. And we must remember when we talk about this now, because sometimes as we engage and we start executing a plan, we forget where we started from. And where we started from on the political landscape here in Canada not so long ago was it looked like doors were closing all around us, and that we as people of faith, as Christians here in Canada, were not going to have access to political parties for much longer. They started to question whether we even had the right to be a part of processes that were political when we had the views that we had. Well, that's all changed now, because we've had a very robust leadership election within one political party, where thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people of faith, Christians all across the nation, were mobilized into that process. And now we followed it up with a very successful delegate selection process for an upcoming policy convention. So there are many people contending on the political landscape right now, contending for their right to be there. Which brings me to why we need to shine a light at this point in time as to a very important part about what is going to be discussed at the upcoming policy convention of the Conservative Party of Canada, the very pitch that we will be executing our plan on. Now, at the political party convention, there are two documents that you're going to be seeing. You're going to be seeing an awful lot about a policy book of the party, which talks about principles and the policies that they believe as members they want to see represented in the work of the party. But there's also this other document. This is very important to all political parties, and this is the party constitution for that party. Now, all political parties have constitutions, and what they are is these are the rules of engagement. This is the rule book for the party. And in this book are enshrined the protections for the rights of members to participate, for example, and under what terms and conditions we get to participate. So you can imagine that if we don't pay attention to the rules of engagement within political parties, that we could in fact find ourselves at a moment in time again in the future where we are not even able to participate in the processes. So delegates that are out there, remember, we are going to be faced with policy considerations to vote on at the convention, but you're also going to have a list of constitutional amendments, and we need to understand as delegates whether those amendments are closing the door for us or whether they're holding the door open for us to engage in the process. Are they going to be tainting our ability to participate? Are they going to be in any way limiting our rights as party members if we hold specific views? So this is why we are there. That's why we're engaged, is to not just advance the things that we believe in, but to preserve our right to participate. Now, that is an important part of the conversation. Another thing that is happening at this party convention with regard to governance is that the party itself has a governing board. And that governing board of the political party is important because they make a lot of decisions about where the party tacks off into the future. And we have an opportunity as delegates at that convention to elect the national board, or what is called the National Council for the Conservative Party of Canada. These are individuals who have put their names forward from all of the different regions of the nation. And we have an opportunity to choose those people who are going to ensure that the playing field remains level and accessible to people of faith. So this is good. This is an important convention, and I encourage you that no matter what happens on the policy side of things, that we give an equal consideration to the importance of governance. All right, so that's all I wanted to say about that. For those of you who are delegates, I know that we're plugged in and connected. If you have not heard from us or heard from the organization called Right Now in our communications, then you need to get in touch with me so that we can get you connected with that organization moving forward. Okay. All right. And then finally today, let's move on to the home stretch here today. Really, really important thing to be talking about these days. And that, as it turns out, is the Citizen Action Group ministry support that we've been providing here at the National Leadership Briefing. Just to recap, Citizen Action Groups are the groups that we have encouraged churches to place in their churches as ministries. Citizen action groups are the infrastructure that are to support the pastor and the church leadership in staying aware of what is happening out there on the political and government landscape and what's happening in society and culture, where that might be either negatively impacting the church or creating an opportunity for us. As I've said on the National Leadership Briefing before, we serve the Citizen Action Group ministries and support them by identifying the threats and opportunities that are out there, and then they can respond locally with this infrastructure in the church. However, this is what we have been hearing back, is that pastors and church leaders have not understood about the way that we've presented these ministry tools, and they're not quite sure how to use them in their hands. So I just want to do a real quick recap of what it is that we have, and I'm going to include all of these links again in the post briefing notes for you today. So if you're a pastor or a part of church leadership, or you are a member of a church and you want to bring this ministry opportunity to your church leadership, please pay attention to these last few moments of the briefing today. The Citizen Action Group ministry is presented today and presented in the post-briefing notes in modules. The first Citizen Action Group video is about 7 minutes long, and it's the introduction. It's sort of like the 30,000-foot flyover. And we use a church in Canada who has a very successful Citizen Action Group ministry as a template for you to follow. So what we've encouraged is for you to download and possess, because they're just not links that you can view. You can download and own that actual video, and you can use it as a teaching and training tool where you can play the 7 minutes, put a pen in your hand is what I'm encouraging you to do, and take notes about how this particular church began. How did their story of identifying the need for a citizen action group begin? How did the pastor, what was in his mind? What were the needs of the church leadership? What was it that they saw out there that were concerning to them? All of these things are represented in the Citizen Action Group intro video. Then there is a second video that focuses just on the mind of the pastor as the church leader. And so then you would encourage your pastor to sit down with a pen in their hand and just watch that again, another 7-minute video where that they can just write down and go, wait a second, so how do I see myself at all in any of these concerns or opportunities that this pastor has or had? And then they can kind of plot and say, okay, is this something that we could put in our church? And then I also have included as a Citizen Action Group ministry tool, the video that is the video of the team leader that responded to the need of the pastor and stood up and said, I will help lead this ministry. So these are the tools that are available to you. And if you don't use them as a teaching and training aid, if you don't sit down and treat it like school, in other words, I'm saying don't just watch it passively. Don't just look at it as, okay, this is kind of entertaining. No, study what it is that you're hearing in the video, because you're actually hearing people with probably what I believe is quite possibly the most effective and I would say one of the best well-operated and organized Citizen Action Group ministries in all of Canada. So you can learn a lot just by hearing their head and their heart that's shared in these videos and the written information that we're also going to provide you. So that's my encouragement, is if you heard about them before, take a second look at Citizen Action Group ministries and look to put one of those in your church and try and find those people that will help you along if you're a member of the church leadership. Okay, well, I hope all of that was helpful today. We're obviously looking forward to following up with you again on the midweek touch points between now and the next briefing. But I can tell you there's so much happening right now. You do not want to miss one. So bring your friends to the next midweek touch point. Make sure you get everyone registered for the next national leadership briefing. But until then, God bless you. God bless your family, and may God continue to bless this great nation of Canada. Bye for now.